Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox, Wilcox86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking about some controversial takes, hot takes, takes against consensus, whatever the hell you want to call it. I really don't necessarily feel like they're hot takes, but it's just kind of going against consensus here. I don't know about Aaron, but I listen to a lot of podcasts, including a lot of Devy podcasts. I hear a lot of people's takes. And so I know when I look at a player and I see where I have him ranked, I know if I'm going against consensus or not, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I kind of went with more of an optimistic theme and some players that I'm higher on than consensus, but I also kind of challenged myself not to talk about the same 8 players that I like to talk about over and over again. And then Aaron kind of took a different approach, not necessarily in a bad way or anything, just a little different. But we're going to be kind of going over a bunch of different takes, a bunch of different players and everything. But first, let's find out how Aaron is. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
You know, I am well. The trade deadline in one of my C2C leagues is actually going on tomorrow. So I've been trying to hash out a couple trades or at least get into some conversations today. I am, on record as not a big fan of trade deadlines, particularly in C2C leagues. I don't think they really, maybe this is my first controversial take of the show. I just don't really think that they fuel activity in your league. If that's the purpose, it makes flurry of trades happen at the deadline. Yeah, no, that's not at least what I've found in all the leagues I've played in. I think they're a little bit more limiting for managers, especially those who maybe are just procrastinating a little bit. So anyways, I do have that deadline coming up, trying to make a couple moves. We'll keep you guys in touch if I make any big splashes for sure. But yeah, no, the leagues, they're going well. A lot of fun so far with the college and the NFL side for fantasy football. So it's been a pretty fun year so far.
Yeah, I mean, I've on the record for not being a fan of trade deadlines either, and I mean, this is my first year in doing campus to Canton leagues, but at the same time, week 7 seems pretty damn early for a trade deadline, regardless of anything else. But yeah, I don't like them in dynasty leagues, so I'm gonna go ahead and assume that I don't like them in campus to Canton leagues either. And I don't really see any true reason why. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. I want people to continue to be able to make trades, continue to be able to evaluate their teams and see, like, what if you have 2 bad injuries in like a week or two, then you might say, okay, well, my team's not exactly what I thought it was 2 weeks ago, and now I want to go make a trade. And I mean, that's maybe an extreme circumstance, but it happens. And so I like the ability to be able to do that, fix your team, do whatever you want to do. But then, like you said, maybe this is our first controversial take. So, we know from doing these podcasts and everything else for a couple of years now that they definitely people are on both sides of the coin there with how they feel about trade deadlines.
That's right. But give the people what they want. Give the people the power, John.
That's right. Speaking of which, so we are in a C2C league together. How are things going in that league?
Good. You and I won 2. Let's go, man.
That's right, baby.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and you and I had our good battle the other week, and that's, I'm assuming, going to continue on until we hopefully play each other in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, that's going really well. Both the C2C leagues that I'm in right now, I mean, pretty good records this season. It's been a lot of fun to kind of see the ups and downs. There's always the players who don't really break out. Both you and I, especially you started like the Tay McWilliams interest for me. And, it's too bad when those guys get injured because we just don't know how they would have done if they were healthy. Right. So
I was getting pretty high on Tay there. I was getting pretty high on Tay there to start the season, and it did not work out. I guess I don't know. Like you said, it was kind of terrible because it was right at the beginning of the year. and so we just don't know what would have happened or whatever, But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Devy Devotional's killing it. 1-2, like Aaron said, and 1-2 by quite a large margin over 3, even at least record wise. So sitting pretty going into the playoffs, but people aren't here to listen to hear about our leagues. They want to know about our players, the players we love, the players we hate, all that kind of stuff. And we have some controversial takes for you tonight. So mine are probably pretty controversial, like maybe not insane. I should probably do my QB one last because that one probably is the most controversial here. Do you have some like softballs to get us started off with, and then we can get into the heaters there a little bit later?
Yeah, softball, we don't really need to beat this dead horse. We've talked about Emeka Egbuka all the time. I mean, we've told everybody how good he was going into the season, and that was never necessarily a slight against Marvin Harrison Jr. Both knew that they were talented, and they're both putting it together this season. But you still see the takes out there. Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 1 in all of Devy. And Emeka Egbuka is nowhere to be found in the top 5 for a lot of those same people. Not that I've searched through everybody's ranks, but he's just not being talked about in that same light as Marvin Harrison Jr. So Emeka Egbuka, he has more fantasy PPR points per game this season. He has a better weighted dominator rating, and his yards per team of pass attempt, I mean, that's much better than Marvin Harrison Jr. this season. 3.72 for Emeka Egbuka. Like, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., again, this isn't a slight against him. 3.05. That is good, right? That's a solid mark. But Emeka Egbuka is just killing it out there. And I get that Marvin Harrison Jr. has that size. Everybody wants the quote unquote alpha, but in today's game, guys like Jamar Chase, guys like Justin Jefferson, they don't need to be 6'4". That's not how things work anymore necessarily. And we can really like both these players, but I think Emeka Egbuka does need a little bit more appreciation. So I think he should be in conversation for that wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 3 mark in all of Devy. I think that's very fair for Emeka Egbuka, and based on consensus, what I've seen so far, that seems to be kind of a bold take.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. Like you said, it's probably a good one to start off with here, because we do have some crazier ones later on. So don't shut off the pod just yet. We're not going to talk about the same guys over and over again. But I think the point is that it just seems, I don't want to say unfair, but it just seems unrealistic to look at what they've been doing and to say Marvin Harrison's up here and Emeka Egbuka is down here. Like at the very least, you should have them very similar. Even if you want to have Marvin Harrison Jr. over him, that's perfectly fine. They're close enough to where I don't care, and I'm not slighting Marvin Harrison Jr. when I say that that I like Emeka, but I do actually have Emeka over. I always say Emeka, whatever. I do have him above him, and it's just like you said. There's just certain things that stand out with him that he's just done a little bit better. I mean, to the point of higher target share, higher yardage, like higher. The only thing that truly stands out for Marvin Harrison Jr. is the touchdowns, and of course, like that's great. Like I'm not trying to turn it down or point make it seem worse or bad that he's scoring touchdowns. We love that, but you have to look at the entire profile and not just say, oh well, he scores a bunch of touchdowns. And so when we do that, or at least when I do that, I like Emeka a little bit better. And I think this week is going to be pretty telling because we're supposed to get JSN back. And or at least I guess that's kind of like the rumor is that he's going to be back this week, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens when we have all 3 of them on the field. What happens then? Because at the beginning of the season, it was Emeka's not going to get on the field. I don't know. At this point, it's going to be kind of hard to take him off, and I mean we already know we both love JSN. I'm not saying that any of them are going to be taken off the field. Maybe it's just going to be a 3-headed dog or whatever it is there, but I just think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens, like target share wise and stuff like that.
Yeah, super interesting. And maybe Julian Fleming, one of those other options, might take a step back with JSN coming back, but I could definitely just see a rotation where all those guys they're fresh, they come out for a couple plays, get fresh going back in. It's going to be a dangerous team here, and we should take the advice that we had with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave when JSN was balling last year. It's not that we need to fade those guys, even though they're, maybe not dominating points wise. So yeah, maybe we should expect for the CFF, for C2C, a little bit of a downtick for Marvin Harrison Jr. and or Emeka Egbuka, or at least some volatility there. But that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. They're great players.
I completely agree. All right, so we're gonna get a little spicier here with mine. My controversial take, and definitely one I've heard some people talking about this player, but not in this regard. But I think Kendre Miller is a top 5 running back in the 2023 class. And like I said, I just haven't really heard that very often. I actually have him at 4 right now in the class, but I don't think it's that crazy that the person that's at 5 could be above him when it's all said and done. It's just it's been kind of a tumultuous year, or whatever you want to call it, for that player, and we can talk about that if you want to. But everything about Kendre looks amazing, except for the fact that he's never truly been a workhorse. Like, that's really like the one true question mark. And when I hear anyone talk about him, and the reason why this is a controversial take, it's always, if he comes out, if he comes out. But I have not been doing this for a very long period of time as far as like analyzing Devy players, and I don't know how often a player like this gets passed up by the NFL, or they tell him, hey, give it another year. I can't guarantee that he's going to come out. What I can guarantee is everything in his profile looks amazing for what he's done. To the point where a player, another top 5 running back in the class, and Zach Evans, was basically matched or possibly even surpassed by Kendre Miller last year when they were on the same team. And now Zach Evans transfers out, and now Kendre's doing this, doing everything himself. It's just they don't really run a lot in that offense, unfortunately, and so it hasn't really turned into a lot. But everything that I've talked about in the past that I look for, points per touch, he has the highest PPR points per touch in the class, as far as like anyone with like a realistic share of a workload or anything like that. At 1.4 PPR points per touch. Bijan Robinson's at 1.3, Travion Henderson's at 1.2, Jahmyr Gibbs 1.2, Will Shipley 1.1, Blake Corum 1.2. So that just shows you like he's even just a step above. And obviously that's probably because he has a smaller workload. It's going to come down, but it's just something that I love to see. And he and even then, he still has 106 scrimmage yards per game, per season, or in his best season. So it's not like he's sitting there getting you like 30 yards, and like that's why I'm sitting there go, the PPR points per touch are great. No, like he's still doing everything that you want to see, per game. It's just that he's not getting a lot of touches, and so he's having to be uber efficient to do it. 10% big time run rate, which I love to see. And, at least good enough size, 6 foot, 206, not like ideal size, but good enough size. So if the NFL can look past the smaller sample, I think the talent is there. And, especially with that big time run rate, like the explosiveness, I've never done like the math on it to like figure it out, but just looking at the big time run rate, I kind of assume there's going to be a lot of burst or a high 40 time, like that kind of thing, or possibly both. Just by looking at those kind of things. And that's kind of some of the stuff that stood out with, like, last year, like a Breece Hall, like those kind of guys. Obviously, like a much different workload, but that was the first time that like I'd truly done like this kind of research before the draft. And those are the things that like truly stood out. So I'm sitting here with my controversial take, my hot take, whatever you want to call it. Kendre Miller, top 5 in the 2023 class. How hot is it?
Kendre Miller, the next Breece Hall is what I heard there. I love that. But I actually think that there are some stylistic comps, but to Breece Hall, actually in some ways, which is just funny that you brought him up. But yeah, Kendre Miller, he has the size that you want. And you mentioned the workhorse, at least how much he's proven to be a workhorse to this point. I mean, he has double-digit carries in every single game besides week 1 against Colorado, where they killed him. So yeah, I'm kind of liking that take, and I do have Kendry in one league. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I'm totally on board with it. And there haven't necessarily been other guys who have skyrocketed up and risen. We know we like Corum. Um, I mean, some of the guys like Zach Evans, I still have him in that top 5 area. We know Gibbs is good. We know Bijan's good, but there's room for another. And Kendrick Miller's definitely making that case, like you said. And his speed is sufficient. I mean, am I going to project him for 4.4s? I'm not. I'm not sure. I mean, he could test in that range. So yeah, I like him a lot. I think that's a very fair take that you had there, John.
Hey, I like it. It wasn't too spicy for you. And actually, Zach Evans was the one that was in fifth, but I said was going to probably be moving ahead of him. And it was because I had told you before that I didn't have his weight wrong, but Sports Reference had his weight wrong for whatever reason. They had him listed at 195, and so I found out, or you let me know that he was closer to like 215. And so once I adjusted that, which I actually just did, I meant to do it this weekend and completely forgot. So once I adjusted that weight, he actually did move above Kendre. So now Evans is where he probably should have been all along because that was just more of an error by them. I have no idea why he was listed at 195. He wasn't even listed as at 195 on like 24/7 or any of these sites, so it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I still have Kendre there at 5 right now. So the take still stands, and I got a go ahead from Aaron. So we're running with it. Kendre Miller, the Breece Hall of two. No, I'm just kidding. And just to be very clear, like he's not at the Breece Hall like grade or score or anything like that, or even in the same tier. But he is, and that's probably more about like workload and stuff like that than anything else. Like if he had all these numbers that he had put up, but had a higher workload, then it'd probably be a little different. But unfortunately, he doesn't, and so we have to look at work with what we got. And Kendre Miller, top 5.
There you go. But we are, for the record, going to have this episode title as Kendrick Miller, the next Breece Hall, just
right.
For the clicks, right? No.
Of course.
Well, I will go ahead with my next take here, and don't know if it's controversial at this point. A lot of times we see some slower reactions as far as catapulting guys up rankings, but I think you'll like this one, John. Quinshon Judkins, RB2 in the 2025 class, and potentially the RB6 in all of Devy going into next year. So first round startup pick potentially. It's Trevion, it's Braylon Allen, Raheem Sanders, Shipley, probably Nick Singleton if he plays this year. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
And then Judkins, right? I mean, yes, we could maybe include Branson Robinson. He's going to be a beast at Georgia, but that backfield, it's muddy. Branson Robinson was not sticking out compared to Andrew Paul, his fellow freshman who tore his ACL, is out for the season. There's just a lot of talent in the backfield at Georgia. So that's why I think Judkins could slot in there. RB6 and all of Devy going into drafts next year. Once all the guys that we were talking about, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, etc., all those guys leave. So is that a bold take, John?
I could actually take it up another notch and say he's the number 1 in the 2025 class. Mm-hmm. At least that's how I have it right now. I mean, obviously there's a lot of time in between now and whenever we have to talk about it again to where, either one of them could step up, step down, whatever. But like you said, Singleton hasn't really been doing too much lately. I mean, he blew up in the beginning, and then he hasn't been on the field. He only had like 3 touches or 3 rushes or something the other day, if I remember correct. I can't remember if that was last weekend or the weekend before, but it is kind of weird that he isn't doing too much. But man, Judkins is standing out. I told you that I had him kind of super high, and I had to kind of not change my model, but I just adjusted the model to make sure that I was looking at how many games a player had played before I move him up too much. And so I did make that adjustment, and he'll actually be hitting like a benchmark where he's going to jump up even more than he already is in one more game. So once he hits 8 games, then he's going to be probably moving up. And right now he's sitting at RB 17 for me overall. And once he hits once he plays one more game, assuming he doesn't play terribly or anything like it, if he just does everything exactly the same and plays one more game, he's probably going to jump up into the top 12, I would assume, because I kind of discounted him pretty heavily for only having played a handful of games at that point. So I could easily see him being in the top 12, and then kind of, and I mean, you're probably already there, like you already have him in the top 12, like that kind of thing. I'm just trying to play the slow game. Maybe that's, maybe I'm probably being too conservative. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that level of being, I guess, conservative, and I'm taking into account what it'll look like next year once all these guys leave, right? So for me, yes, I'm still going to slot in a bunch of the guys, Jameer Gibbs, Zach Evans, Corum, those guys ahead, just because we'll get them sooner to our NFL squads. I guess Corum could be argued. I mean, just if people have doubts about the size, which I think has been probably the bigger question mark. It's not a matter of if he's good. It's just that if the NFL will trust him with that large workload, because he's proven that he is a good player. So Quinshon Judkins, very fair to be in that conversation. I don't think you're too slow necessarily with that. I think you appreciate what he is, but you also are looking at the model and saying, well, we can't skyrocket this guy up off of this small sample size. And he's also a 2025 guy. So he's a ways out. In C2C, that's money. He's going to be a great producer.
Yeah.
Devy, you'll have to wait.
So actually, I just changed it to 8 games just to see what it would do in the model. And he moved up right above Corum, actually right above Kendre. So it's I mean, kind of right there. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty good, pretty good company right there.
That's excellent as a true freshman. I really like that. And Ole Miss, they've had a good running game this year, and we've kind of went back and forth. Maybe we'll talk about Zach Evans. I don't know if you have a controversial take with him at all. It seems like he's moved back up, to be honest, from what you were saying. But they're both killing it this year. And Evans has been running with some sort of injury or multiple injuries, at least stuff that he's been hurt with, not necessarily injured enough to keep him out of games. But Quinshon Judkins hasn't skipped a beat. He's finishing out games. He's getting a ton of production there.
It's kind of crazy that, Evans just can't get away from these great backfields, like Kendre Miller first, then Quinshon Judkins. I mean, he's got to be hating life, or maybe, I don't know, maybe he likes it. And we had talked about Evans before, obviously with the weight thing, but I'd also said he's just not doing it on the field. Well, this week everything changed. He had 136 yards, and I mean, I don't know what it was, injury related or whatever, but I needed to see it. I couldn't believe, he has this injury, it's just nagging for weeks and weeks and weeks, and he's going to be getting 40 yards a game. Sorry, I'm not having you in my top 5 if you're doing that. But he probably jumped back up. He was originally this high. This is where he was at the beginning of the season for me, Evans. Actually, he was. No, yeah. Oh no, he was at third. Right now I have him in 4th, but I have him directly behind the third guy. So I mean, he could even move up even more if he does more. But basically right where I had him at the beginning of the year, he just wasn't doing much. And then as far as Judkins, like you said, everything you want to see from a true freshman, and good enough size, especially for a freshman. We would probably assume that he's gonna jump up a little bit, maybe be 210, 215 when it's all said and done. Right around that ideal size that we like. So I like the take. Like I said, as of right now, I have him ahead of Nicholas Singleton. So I don't even think it's all that crazy. So I mean, they're essentially back to back. There's one player in between them in the ranks, but essentially back to back there. But why don't we go ahead and talk about my next player? And honestly, this one's probably going to be pretty spicy. I haven't heard too many people talking about this guy, and it's a 2023 QB. So we know that everyone wants a 2023 QB to step forward and be that QB3, and no one knows who it's going to be at this point. We've heard Will Levis, we've heard Anthony Richardson, we've heard who else? Hendon Hooker, all these players. Now, I have this person in a tier of 5 players in the 2023 class. These players are not in the Bryce Young and CJ Stroud tier. They're not even in the second tier. They're in the third tier. Okay, so like let's not get insane here. But I have him at the top of this tier, which is probably pretty crazy. And the tier consists of, if I can get to my ranks here, Grayson McCall, who I've talked about before, and I love me some Grayson McCall. I actually thought about talking about him tonight, but he's a small school guy. Just we don't know how the NFL is going to treat him, like that kind of thing. But he's actually the second guy in this tier. Hendon Hooker, who's moving up every week, so like he could easily be the QB3 in this class for me, even when it's all said and done, which is pretty cool for player, 5th-year player, super senior, all that kind of stuff, or like 8th-year player at this point. He's 25 years old. Tyler Van Dyke, that I've talked about before. He's had some issues, but he's actually looked pretty good the past couple weeks. Like I don't know what, something clicked, and all of a sudden he's throwing for 300, 400, 500 yards a game, and everything's. And I mean, it's not like the talent got better for like wide receivers and stuff on the team. So he's there in that tier. And then Jaden Daniels, who we've talked about, substantially, so we don't need to talk about him anymore. But he's actually dropped to the bottom of the tier, which he used to be a little higher for me, but he's just really not taking like a step forward that I would have loved to have seen at LSU there. But the player that I'm going to be talking about, very long-winded way of saying, is Will Rogers out of Mississippi State. I think, and the reaction I got from Aaron there says it all. Like I said, we're doing controversial takes here. I just don't think he's getting the respect that he deserves. Like I talked about Grayson McCall, and with McCall, it's like he's a small school guy. I get it. Like even though he looks amazing, all that, it's just that is the NFL gonna fall in love? But with Will Rogers, we're talking about a top 25 team right now. They were ranked 16th last week. They lost to Kentucky, another top-ranked team. So, I mean, it's not like the end of the world or anything. But they're still ranked 24th right now as far as, like, they're on the national radar, that kind of thing. He's breaking records. He just tied Dak Prescott's touchdown record for most touchdowns at Mississippi State. He actually is I can't remember if he already did it or if he's going to do it this upcoming week, but he's actually on pace to break the completions record for the SEC, I believe it is. But and he's doing all this as a junior. It's not like he's some super senior where he's just had 5-6 years to do it. But everything that I look for in a QB, like the big things that I look for at least are, QBR. I want you to be above that like 70 range. Anything in the 60s and below, you're probably not going to be good enough. This year he's sitting at a 70, like right around a 70. Now that's once again not that top tier. Your Drake Mays, your CJ Strouds, like those guys are closer to 85, like 88, that kind of thing. Adjusted yards per attempt, I really want you to be over like a 7.5, or preferably over an 8. Especially in the SEC, it's okay to be a little bit lower, and he's at an 8.2. So that's kind of like maybe barely, but he's above that threshold, and he's taken another step forward this year where he wasn't quite there last year, and that's why he's moved up in the ranks for me. Now he doesn't run, negative 1.1 yards per carry, so we know he's not going to be that kind of threat. So that kind of takes a knock on him. But he's going to be safe with the ball, only a 1.5% interception rate. And that's like one of the things that I really like to focus on is, can you be safe with the ball while still scoring points, while still scoring touchdowns? Well, like I said, he just tied and is going to break Dak Prescott's record at the same school, obviously in a different program. I get the air raid. I get all that. But the thing is, he's extremely efficient, extremely accurate in that air raid. I mean, when you're throwing it that much and you're not turning the ball over, you're scoring touchdowns, you're doing all that kind of stuff. That's just what I like to see. So I don't think he's going to be drafted in the first round per se. I guess it's not insane. But when it's all said and done, I really do think he could be the QB3. Although, like I said, Hendon Hooker's kind of making his case for why he might be. But right now, I have Will Rogers as the QB3 in the 2023 class. What do you think? I know it's pretty spicy.
Yeah, it's spicy. I thought since you ended up watching the Alabama-Tennessee game, I thought you were going to go Hendon Hooker there. But it makes sense because Hendon Hooker, at this point, that's not necessarily that spicy. a lot of people are slotting him in, and it makes sense. I think he has a good case for it. I did not expect the Rodgers take. I I'm just very curious. I have just not looked back historically at how guys who have been as successful as he has been in an air raid type system, how they've fared, in the NFL or draft capital or both, I guess. I'm very curious because, like you said, he's been excellent in that system. Is that going to be enough? Is the NFL going to respect it? And you can ask the same thing of a guy from my lesser program in Grayson McCall too. Is the NFL going to give them the respect after they disrespected like a Howell last year for UNC? And I get it. Howell had a down year too, but those are just some thoughts that kind of come up for me. But honestly, with how he's improving, he needs to do two things: beat Bama this week and beat Georgia in 2 weeks. If he does, I would say one of the two, but hopefully two of the two. He's right there, right? That no longer becomes a bold take. Everybody's gonna be talking about him on every network. You betcha that guy's, I don't know, some of the NFL analysts or ESPN analysts. You got McShay and you got Kuiper. They'll have him as QB1 if he beats those teams, right? So I think that's a spicy take, probably the spiciest so far, but I like it, John.
Yeah, and like you said, I think there are reasons to think he won't be drafted in the first round. But then again, Hendon Hooker, every take that I've heard about him is that it's kind of the same thing. Like he's not in like a true NFL offense and things like that. So if we're dealing with the same discounts on these players, then I'm going to go with the one that's been a little bit better, like for a while now, breaking records, doing all that kind of stuff. And he's always been up there, like in like tier 3, tier 4. He just wasn't like truly standing out, but he did take a step forward this year. So that's why I have him here. I get it spicy, but when you have guys like Will Levis being talked about in the top 5, Anthony Richardson, like guys like that, I get it's more like arm talent and physical tools talent and stuff like that related, but sometimes I think you have to look at who the best players are, and the fact that you had said look at Sam Howell. I can't remember now, but like North Carolina wasn't good last year. Like they weren't ranked. They were never ranked last year, right? Like so I get that Sam Howell was always like a top guy that everyone talked about. But I feel like when you're on that national radar, you're a ranked team, you're winning games, you're not just like, you're not losing to like teams that you shouldn't be losing to per se, then, it makes a big difference for the NFL, I think. So I think all the things are there for him right now. Like all the pieces are there. He just has to put it all together. Finish the season, like you said, maybe get a big surprise win or two, and then go ahead and be a top 5 pick. No, I'm not that spicy.
Right, and them being ranked currently makes sense. If they lose to Bama this week, I mean, they shouldn't move down considerably. Most teams would lose to Bama, right? But being at 24, yeah, they probably fall out. So hopefully something happens where they can kind of stay in relevance, and that would be huge for a guy like Will Rogers. But as far as my next take, it was a string of players that I really think that should just be higher up in Devy radars, C2C leagues. They should carry more value, and the NFL should take a look at them as day 2 wide receivers. And those 3 names are Trey Palmer, Nebraska wide receiver. We got Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee wide receiver, and then Ally Jennings, Old Dominion wide receiver. So I get it. Jennings probably the least appealing of them just because of the small school, because he plays for Old Dominion. That's just going to be a detraction, or it's going to be kind of a ding on him throughout the process. But when a guy has like a 40 or a 54% weighted dominator and he's doing what he's been doing this season, you got to pay attention to him. But guys who are playing against better competition, that'd be Trey Palmer and Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt just roasted Alabama. That was ridiculous, the performance that he just put on. And maybe this isn't that spicy because people are catching on that he's actually a good player. But he struggled last year. I get why people are hesitant to fully buy in. I think he's just finally understanding what he needs to do within that offense. But there's reasons to be skeptical. Will Tillman coming back eat into his share? But similar to Emeka Egbuka in some ways, once you flash that dominance against teams like Bama and what Jalen Hyatt's doing, uh, his yards per team pass attempt, his 34% weighted dominator. He's a former 4-star guy. This guy's no scrub, and he has a lot of athleticism to boot. So I think Hyatt should be talked about more. And then also Palmer. I mean, Palmer, 42% weighted dominator, 3.53 yards per team pass attempt. And he's a former high 4-star who spent his first 3 seasons at LSU blocked by Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and then afterwards, Kayshon Boutte, and then Eric Gilbert and Terrace Marshall the one year. Say what you want about Terrace Marshall. I mean, he was pretty good in college. He's drafted pretty highly by the NFL as well. So I guess there's some reasons to explain away why Trey Palmer. It took him 4 seasons to truly break out. But we know that LSU valued his athleticism because he was a return guy for them previously as well. So he brings that versatility to the game. What do you think about those 3 guys? Maybe is there one that either sticks out as you really like or one that's spicy? Anything, John?
So as you were talking, I was listening. Even if it didn't look like it was, I was realizing that Ali Jennings wasn't showing up in the model, and I was trying to figure out why. And unfortunately, when you're doing these models and stuff, one of the things that happens quite often is one site has him as Ali Jennings, and the next site has him as Ali Jennings the third. And so when you go to do your index match formulas, it doesn't all add up. Now, luckily, I've done things the right way to where I can fix it very quickly, and I just fixed it. So I just added him into the model while you were doing that, while you were talking about him. And so now I'm going to adjust that and bring him up here. And so what's hilarious is that I have Ali Jennings and Jalen Hyatt back-to-back in the rankings now, which is pretty funny that you're talking about them. And I actually have Trey Palmer slightly ahead of those 2. So now, here's the only thing I will say. And I watched that game with Jalen Hyatt, and it was amazing. They had no answer for him whatsoever, and I don't know why. Like you said, I don't know why he didn't step forward before or anything like that. But obviously we can say Cedric Tillman isn't there right now, and so he took a step forward because another player wasn't there. But you don't catch 5 touchdowns just because another player is not there. You don't do things that he did. I do think that one big game like a Jalen Hyatt can make him skyrocket in the ranks, but then if he goes back to what he's been doing, before, then obviously he's going to keep falling. But right now I have him in a very, very nice tier where, I feel like he would be drafted well, like that kind of thing. So if he can continue forward doing what he's doing, or what he's been doing the past couple of games or the past, few games, keep doing it for the rest of the season, I could easily see Hyatt doing that. Palmer's kind of the same thing. He had a big game. I think he had 230 yards or something like that receiving in this past game, a few touchdowns. So it's kind of the same thing. We need to see it more than one big game. It's the same thing with Quentin Johnston. I've been talking about all season how we needed to see him do more, and he was completely off people's radars, or my radar at the very least, because he had an 8% market share, and then bam, in 2 games he skyrockets up. No, he's still only at a 25% market share for the season, but that's because he did absolutely nothing for 4 games or 3 games or whatever it was. So it's not that you can't fix things. It's not that you can't skyrocket. It's just that you have to keep doing it. And so we just need to see it from all these players. But even as an Old Dominion player, is Jennings a senior? I just want to make sure I have it in there right.
Yeah, it's his 4th year. And, him transferring into Old Dominion, he would have even stuck out more so last year if he didn't get off to kind of just a slow start with the new team. Because down the stretch, he was doing the same dominance.
Yep. So, I mean, it actually does kind of stand out that Jennings is a senior and a small school guy. And he's right now 1 spot ahead of Jalen Hyatt. So that's kind of cool, and that's definitely, we don't see too many small school guys truly stand out. But he could easily be one. And honestly, if we hadn't done this pod, I might not have known it. I might not have, I would have figured it out at some point. But I'm glad I figured it out now, got that fixed. And I hate when that happens, but it's also cool to see sometimes where a guy that's just like completely been off my radar because of three eyes in his name, and so I don't see it.
I like it, and I really do think that there's a good chance that Palmer gets that day 2 draft capital. I'm a little bit more on the fence on Jalen Hyatt and Jennings. I just think that all three of them should be mentioned as guys who should be attracting some attention. That's for sure.
Hey, Beth agrees with you right now. I mean, it's a different tier. They're in a different tier. So I mean, technically, I don't get into like draft capital and stuff like that. And maybe one day I will. I just haven't really taken the time to actually like try to project draft capital. I just try to project the best players. But generally speaking, I see at least the best players in the model end up with the better draft capital. And so as of right now, I would assume that Trey Palmer would get better draft capital. And once again, being a senior, just the fact that he's standing out above a Jalen Hyatt, because I do discount seniors a little bit because they took an extra year. Now, there's obviously times where it makes sense, and like I love me some Zay Flowers. We always talk about him, and I think there's always a reason why they might stay an extra year, but I still discount them. It's like, okay, well, you didn't come out in your junior year, that kind of thing in the model. I can always fix it later on if I feel like it, whatever. But just the fact that he's still standing out or a tier ahead is nice to see with Trey Palmer. And obviously the game that he had this past week was great as well. I honestly didn't have too many others. Like I said, I've talked about so many players, and I didn't really want to talk about the same players over and over again. So I think I might just stick with my spicy take of Will Rogers, as my last spicy take. We're about 45 minutes here, but I know you had a few other players that you wanted to touch on before we get out of here.
Yeah, we don't need to necessarily discuss them very much. Just things to be considering, I guess. Josh Downs, I mean, I know he was banged up to start the season, so maybe that's why he's not getting more recognition. But why shouldn't he move ahead of Keishawn Butte? There's just very little reason for that, unless you're just somehow just didn't buy into Downs because of his year 1 lack of production, I guess. But I mean, year 2 killed it, and now he's killing it again. He's the main cog in that offense. He's not banged up, doesn't have the ankle or / foot surgery history that Butte doesn't have the off the field and or just whatever's going on in that locker room with the coaching staff, doesn't have those issues or those concerns. So maybe people don't like the possibility that Josh Downs measures in sub 5'10", which I can understand that, but that doesn't make him a bad player by any means. And he's versatile all over the field. So I love Downs. I think he should be above Keishawn Butte. Might be spicy for some. I know you and I like Downs a lot. So I think it's more so Butte falling versus, Downs is elite of the elites. I think it's a little bit of both, I guess, but I just think that those guys could easily be swapped.
No argument for me. I don't have them that far from each other, far away from each other in the model, but like you said, there's no injury history there with Downs, or like no major injury history or anything like that. And he's just, everything he's done on the field has just been amazing. People were concerned about him only being a slot receiver, and now we're seeing he's doing both. He's doing inside and out and everything. So I think at this point, I've said it before, the only thing you can truly say is his size, and I just don't truly care. And I will give Butte some credit because, he's been kind of that Quentin Johnston role, like doing nothing. And he kind of took a step forward this week. I don't know if he finally figured out, hey, I'm not even going to be drafted at this point. So maybe I should actually go run some routes or what it was. I don't think he had a huge week or anything by any means, but I want to say he had like 100 yards or something like that. It was a much better showing than what he's been doing. So he actually moved up a couple spots because he just kept dropping. And, I know some people just wanted to give him all the credit in the world and say, it doesn't matter. He did enough last year, the year before, whatever. That's just not me. That's not my game. That's not how I rank. I want to see it unless there's a real reason, like he's injured this year. If you're on the field, I want to see you on the field doing good things and being great. Now I still have them, very high, but I'm right there with you. Josh Downs is easily ahead of Keishon Butte as of right now, 6-7 weeks into the season. Obviously, anything could happen in the next 5 weeks or so, but as of right now, I say that's a pretty easy take, and I don't think it's a consensus take. So it's spicy, but it makes sense.
For sure. And there's smaller takes out there, but I think that's a good one to end on as well. A little bit of spice today. Maybe it's not quite the hot cooking that people are looking for out there. Hopefully we did a fair service to you guys today, getting some takes with a little bit of spice, not too much, right? We don't want to scare anybody off. We don't want to leave you scarred coming from the show.
Exactly. It's just one of those things where, we can sit here and just talk out of our asses and just say whatever, but like we actually have like strong feelings or strong reasoning behind all of these takes. So, they're against consensus, but that's why we want to talk about them, because we want to tell you or explain to you guys why we feel that way and why we feel like it might change. Once again with Kendre, I don't think it's a talent thing. It truly is if he comes out. But even then, people are talking about him, if he comes out, if he goes into the NFL draft. But no one's really talking about him being one of the top guys. It's more like, if he comes out, he could be this. He could be like a day 3 guy. No, like I think he will be a day 2 guy 100% if he comes out. And, not only that, like I said, top 5. So a little spice, a little nice, but we didn't want to just talk about the same stuff over and over again. We've done a lot of sleeper shows and buys and sells and all that kind of stuff, and we'll definitely get back into that. But we just wanted to kind of spice things up here in the middle of the season before we get back into some player analysis in the next pod. But we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you, Aaron, for jumping on with me. I know we were trying to figure out when we could do this, and I couldn't really schedule it per se and let people know when we were going to be recording, because we didn't really know when we were going to be recording. But here we are, we got it done. But for now, we're cashing out. See you guys.